Okay, hello, it's Paul Green from the business community, doing another one of our regular Spotlight on interviews where we delve into the business journey of a particular person. And that person today is Mike Ainsworth from EMF. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Paul.
Thanks for coming along today. So, do you just before we dive in and find out a little bit about you, do you just want to let us know who you are and what you do?
Yep, I'm Mike Ainsworth. I am the Regional Director for EMF Group in Milton Keynes. I cover Herts, Beds, Bucks and Essex. We sell businesses. I've also value businesses and talk to people about the importance of an exit strategy and what the business is worth, how much it's likely to be worth, how they can improve the worth of it. So basically, business sales, more or less up to 2 million turnover, although in terms of valuations, I can go a lot higher.
Okay, excellent. And how long have you been doing that, Mike?
About 9 years.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your business journey then, how you came to be where you are today.
It's a long journey. How long have you got?
As long as we're done by lunchtime, I'll be fine.
My work journey started in Australia. I moved to Australia with my parents when I was a teenager. I was at grammar school here. I went to high school over there. I always had a love-hate relationship with school. I struggled with the concentration of lessons and was really quite good at passing exams quite easily. So I got a scholarship, went on to high school to do matriculation, or senior high school to do matriculation, broke my arm very badly. And I had a plaster from my fingers right through to my shoulder, and I couldn't write, which made classrooms even more difficult for me. So I left school, and despite having a scholarship, I upset everyone and left school, and I got a job with the commercial banking company of Sydney in Perth, in St George's Terrace. Our bank mascot was Skippy, and I think probably still remains the most famous person I've ever met in my life. Cutting what could be a very long story about having cashiers having guns and picking up the weekly wages money from the Reserve Bank in the bank car with guns. I move on to the fact that we moved back. My family moved back to England. I didn't have to come with them, but I did. And when I came back, I thought, well, maybe I should really go to university, which I was going to do anyway. And I was still thinking about what I was going to do. I walked into Barclays Bank in Slough High Street and I said, can I open a bank account, please? And the guy said, what's your occupation? He was going down the form, what's your occupation? I said, unemployed bank clerk. Being me, I just had to say something flippant. Next thing I know, the bank manager's interviewing me for a job. And the next thing I know, they've offered me a job and I work for Barclays Bank. And this was in the old days and very old days, and we were slightly ahead of Australia, but the bank manager was one of the most important people in the town then. It was a job to be looked up to. It was a job for life. Your career path was mapped out for you pretty much from the beginning. As I said, I'm kind of quite good at exams, and so one of the things that persuaded me to stay with the bank was that I could take my banking qualification, which was kind of degree level, and I did that very quickly, and I therefore stood out a little bit. And so any thoughts of leaving Barclays were, for the time being, were wrecked by the fact they kept promoting me. So every couple of years I'd go off and do another job. I was kind of on the fast track, although I went faster than the fast track. I was made a manager in head office at a quite young age. And then I came back to branches where I was in branch management. By then I'd done head office, and by branches I had gone down the corporate route, which in the old days it was either the personal banking route or the corporate route. I was much more interested in the corporate route. And so I went to the larger business unit in head office where I was an analyst, and then the R&D section for corporate, and where I was a manager, and then back to being a corporate manager in St Albans, because they wouldn't take me back in my old region of which was Windsor at the time. So I moved up to this neck of the woods in St Albans, which covers up to Milton Keynes. And I was a corporate manager, and they kept promoting me. I went into training. That probably wrecked my career because it was great fun, but 3 years off in training was a bit off the mainstream. And I came back, but I was head of corporate then in Aylesbury and then Milton Keynes. And by now, this was the mid-90s, and banking had changed from the bank that I joined. And reality, I should have just gone with the flow and just changed myself, but I didn't like it. We were mis-selling, and you know, time has proved me right big time. We were given silly targets to sell people stuff they didn't want, insurance and derivatives and all sorts of targets that reality the customers didn't want, and I was proved right on saying this isn't right. So I left. So I upped and left my job for life and went into business on my own. And since then, I've always been restless. The bank was fine for being restless because they would promote me and they would move me to another branch. And by the time I left, I was in Milton Keynes, and they hadn't moved me for 3 or 4 years. And so I was beginning to get restless anyway. But I then became restless in my own business career. So I started off as a broker stroke consultant for a number of companies. I had offers before I left the bank, and so I took up 2 or 3 of them all over the country. I worked as a kind of non-exec director, non-exec finance director, almost for a couple of companies up in Yorkshire, a couple around here, and that lasted about 6 years. And I think since then I've gone in 6-ish years phases. So I moved from running other people's or helping run other people's businesses to helping run my own business, and I was in importing for a while. I sold that business, and that was a disaster. The sale was an absolute disaster. The agent was a disaster, and the agreement I got to sell it was a disaster, and I lost quite a lot of money about that. At the same time, my parents, who were also had their own business, sold their business or tried to sell their business. They massively left it too late. My father was always desperate not to show any profit, and although they had lived comfortably off this business for 30 odd years, they couldn't sell it, so it would say it was a freehold property. They sold the freehold property eventually, so that was a bit of a disaster at the same time. I then moved into marketing and a bit of business coaching, and I was looking for something else to do, and I was looking through Dalton's or Businesses for Sale. I can't remember which one, but one of the business sale websites, and I came across the franchise for the EMF locally. At the time, my predecessor was running it from Essex, but it covered Essex, which is a bit far for me, but it also covered Bucks, Hearts. Truthfully, Hearts is kind of the main part of the region anyway. And so I went to speak to him, and when I met the franchisor, who were down in Devon, they were just such lovely people. And my skills that I learned from 20 years in corporate banking, running my own business, I knew how to value a business already. I kind of understood the financial side of a business quite well. I also understood the running of the business side quite well. So my skills just overlapped it perfectly, to be honest. So I bought it for not a lot, because it came with a work in progress. I sold all the businesses that came with it. So it didn't even then by then owe me anything. And here I am, eight years later. I've been running it reasonably successfully for the last 8 years. Had some ups and downs, obviously, but I continue to learn every day. I've always been keen on learning, despite my love-hate relationship with school. I love learning, and I read books. I continue to develop and continue to learn, and mainly by experience or by reading what other people are doing.
And you've written a book. Is that to hand?
It is somewhere. Nice question. Thank you very much. Yes, Making Plans for Business Exit. It's a booklet, really. It's 20 odd thousand words, and talks about the technical side of running the business, selling a business and valuing a business, and also talks about the importance of the different elements of valuing a business. So it's not quite as simple as saying every business is valued at 3 times profits. It's a lot more complicated than that, and that will depend upon your scalability and your profit record, obviously your management team, and whether you're in what industry you're in, etc. So that's all in that book. It's £10 off Amazon, or if you know you well enough, I'll give you a copy.
Okay, excellent. You gave me a copy. Thank you for that. It still is on my book reading list. I've browsed through it, but I've not read it properly yet. But it might prompt me to do it now. Now I'm in front of you and feeling guilty.
Well, so, one of my colleagues read it. Funny enough, he just went on holiday, and he rang me to say on holiday he'd read my book. Now, you know, most people tend to read something a bit more holiday-ish, but he read my book on holiday, and he said it was. He rang me to thank me and tell me it was really good. So.
And I think I can prove it. Just if you can grab it.
Perhaps you need a holiday.
Just to let you know that it's on my desk, because when I haven't just done it for this interview, it is there on the pile of books to read. So, yes, so great. So, is there any particular sectors that you specialise in terms of selling businesses?
Small businesses. I did try to move originally. My history tends to be dealing with bigger businesses, but at the end of the day, you have to know what your overall business and your reputation, the overall reputation of your business is where it comes from. So as I said earlier on, probably up to 2 million turnover in terms of small businesses. But other than that, I'm sector agnostic. We were appointed by McColl's Group to sell a number of their retail stores, and so we've still got a lot of people looking for retail stores at any time, and I'd love to sell those because it's just like falling off a log. Otherwise, the food sector can be very good as well, coffee shops, etc. But if it makes money and it's sellable, then I can sell it.
Okay. And so if someone's interested in selling their business, what's the process? How do you work with them to establish, you know, whether it is saleable and what the value is, etc., etc.?
Okay, the first step is a discussion and evaluation and a sellability assessment. So I go through the accounts and obviously have an interview, half an hour or whatever. To be honest, I can value businesses sometimes walking outside them if they really fit in the mold. But if it's outside the mold, a lot more difficult. But basically, it's a discussion. Look at the accounts, see what they're actually making. Look behind the figures, look behind the numbers. Obviously, we've had this, I call it COVID, but other people seem to call it COVID thing for the last 18 months. That's going to affect some people. It will affect some more than others. Some have done very well in COVID, and others have done disastrously. And some of those that have done disastrously will emerge fine, and some of those that have done disastrously won't emerge fine. So, you know, we've got to try and establish the reality, because nobody buys a business based on past performance except to predict future performance, because past profits are irrelevant when you buy a business. The only relevant thing is what it's going to make this week, next year, etc. And indeed, what's more important is the cash it's generating and not the profit it's generating. But that's another story.
And you said earlier that your parents left selling their business too late. Do you find that other businesses leave it too late? And if what does leaving it too late mean?
Almost everybody. There are a few people, and I'll talk about it later, who start off thinking about selling the business, so they build a business to sell it, but they are in such a small minority they almost could be dismissed. Nearly everybody, nearly every telephone call I get is from somebody who wants to sell the business within 6 months, who hadn't started thinking about it until the day he started looking for someone to ring or talking, getting recommendation for someone to call. So nearly everybody. And what the outcome is that the business is either unsellable because you've left some of the key drivers of value and ignored them. And again, I'll talk about one of the key drivers in more depth when I get to my 4 recommendations or 4 points later on. Or you've, as my father did, desperate not to show profit, and you've depressed your profit in the accounts, and you can't therefore go back to those accounts and say, well, actually, I was really making this, because who do you believe? Someone that says, well, look, it's showing £40,000, but I really made 100 or 60 or whatever the number is. Unless you can specify exactly where the rest of the money's gone, then you're stuck with that figure that your accounts are showing.
Yeah. So is there an ideal sort of like lead time for positioning in a business to sell?
The day that the ideal is the day that you start the business up. A decent number would be 5 years, 4 years. You want 3 years figures. Ideally, you want 3 years figures when you're selling it. Ideally, those 3 years figures should be minimum consistent, or preferably slightly increasing, so that people can extrapolate and show an increasing trend. So most people will look for 3 years accounts. You don't always get them, and sometimes people will sell the business after a year, 2 years. You can't have 3 years accounts, and it can still be sold, but you are shooting yourself in the foot slightly. Because people will want 3 years.
No,
not because that's important, except that extrapolating forward from a base of 3 years is going to give you a better feeling than extrapolating forward from a base of 6 months or 1 year.
Okay, so the next question you're going to tell me is crap, because you shared this with me before we started the broadcast. Is I ask people what's their why, and really what that is getting to, what's the driving force, what gets you out of bed in the morning. So tell me about that question, Mike.
It's an emotional question. The mere question of asking why somebody does something is an emotional question. And Simon Sinek, whose question that is, will tell you that it's like when you ask a child, why did you do that? And they'll just go defensive, and they'll clam up. But in order to get to the why, you probably need to ask them 3 or 4 questions to get round to it, instead of which you're going to go straight to me. And I've already thought about it, and the easy thing is to tell you it's because I love helping people, and the reality is that I do. I love working with corporate businesses. I love working with other people's businesses. I love the feeling that when you've sold somebody's business for a decent sum, and that they can walk away from it and hold hands in the sunset, that's a great feeling. I love helping people with evaluation and maybe point out something they didn't know, and to see them changing that, maybe even recommending them to a business coach who can help them change that, because I tend to value a business and then leave it. I don't stay with the people, although I will come back. So I do help. I do enjoy that. So I think if I'm going to give an answer to why, it is not a trite answer. That is something I genuinely enjoy working with businesses.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Mike. I mean, I didn't know what my why was till I did a workshop with Jackie Sherman, who you know. So, it's not necessarily obvious to everybody, what their why is. So that's why I do recommend the book that Simon Sinek wrote called What's Your Why, isn't it? Something like that.
Getting to Why, I can't remember. But
it's behind me in the bookshelf. You can see somewhere. So there's other people out there, I guess, involved in the buying and selling of businesses. So what makes you different from any competitor out there, would you say?
Without, is it slandering or libeling on a video? Some of my competitors, it's a bit of a dog eat dog world. I am the business equivalent of an estate agent, who don't always get good press, despite the fact that there are many good estate agents, and there are many good business transfer agents. And I'm talking about business transfer agents specifically as my competitors, because once you get above 2 million, certainly above 5 million turnover, it's a different market altogether. And the sort of people that will be selling your business in general are much more ethical than some of my competitors. Some of my competitors are not ethical. Some of them are what we call churn and burn. They're only interested in taking a business on, picking up a large upfront fee, and in order to do that, they will overvalue. So they will appeal to, it's easy to say greed, but it's not the right word, of the seller. The over optimism perhaps is a better word of the seller in promising things that they just can't deliver. I won't do that. If I don't think I can sell a business, I won't take it on. That's not to say that I have 100% confidence every time of selling a business, because I haven't, because you're dependent upon finding the right person, and for a business in certain sectors, it isn't, you just might not come across that person. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. But I won't take a business on that I don't think I can sell. My contract, agency agreement, I'd prefer to call it. People don't like the word contract, but it is a contract. Is fair. There are no hidden terms in it. EMF are really good people. They're very ethical. If myself or any of my fellow regional directors were to get up to no good, then they would hear about it and we'd be out on our ear. And we have lost a couple like that over the years. That's not to say I'm the best, but I think EMF of the big groups, the nationwide groups, EMF personally are up there in the top 2 or 3. And with me, you get the advantage of being someone that's local and working for a national group. Has been going 50 odd years. So I'm not a local independent who could be very good, but perhaps doesn't have the advantage of being able to pick up the phone and chat things through with the people at head office or one of my other colleagues. And I'm certainly not one of the salesmen that work for the Churn and Burn agents who, this is all Googleable. If you know your way around Google, it's all there.
Yeah.
So I don't want to knock them too much. I don't want to concentrate on that too much. We do a good job. We do our best, and we are ethical. That's basically that's what makes that in our industry, that can make you stand out.
No, I can see that. I can certainly see that. Do you find that when you valid a business, that the business owner is disappointed in what you valid it at?
Sometimes, yes.
And is that because they have a perception that it's a much higher value and it's got goodwill in it, etc., that's going to rank up the numbers?
That's because they haven't thought about it until the second they start thinking about selling, and in the meantime, maybe their accountant has told them it's worth a lot more than it really is. Accountants sometimes, if they're buying a business for a client, they want rock bottom prices. If they're selling business for a client, they want sometimes unrealistic figures, and so sometimes they could have been persuaded by someone else. Sometimes they just don't know, and sometimes, of course, someone who's thinking of selling might just need a number. I mean, if you haven't got a pension, or you've got a limited pension and you need to retire in your 65 or 60, then you need a number in your bank account to enable you to retire. And if I don't get the figure that hits that number, yes, they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. And how do you charge for your services? How does that work?
90% of it is on sale, so no sale, no fee, no cancellation charges. A minimum 6 months. If I take on somebody, I want at least 6 months to try to sell it. There is usually a registration fee, but it's a nominal fee just to partly to separate the serious from the non-serious, partly to cover the work that's involved in taking on a business. But 90 odd % is purely on sale, and that's based upon the selling price, maybe subject to a minimum.
Yeah, understand. Okay. And you mentioned COVID over the last 18 months. That's obviously been most small businesses' biggest challenge. Outside of that, on your business journey, what would you say has been your biggest challenge?
I was going to say COVID.
Well, I've taken it off the table now.
You've taken it off the table. Lead generation, generating the right sort of leads, is probably consistently a challenge for everybody. I network a fair bit, including your group, for which I'm very pleased to get quite a few leads, and other groups. Other things have changed. I used to do a lot of direct mail, and I've done 2 direct mailings this year and got 0 response. So at the moment, I mean, COVID means that my register is probably, I've got a third of the number of businesses to sell that I had 5 years ago.
Mm.
To a certain extent, that's me. I'm a little bit more fussy about who I take on.
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment, I have got fewer businesses than I'd like. Ideally, it doesn't keep me awake at night, fortunately. But ideally, I would like a few more.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the old lead generation methods no longer work. And also, I think a lot of people are now nervous at selling the business. There are some people who are desperate to sell, and I've taken on 1 or 2 people who had enough, and they've had COVID, and they've simply had enough. Talking to somebody this week who's had enough, and he wants to go, but other people are thinking, well, maybe I'll just sit tight for a little while. I'm making money, and just see how this thing pans out. So, can I say post-COVID is my biggest challenge?
Yeah, you can say that, yeah. Okay, so thanks for that. You kindly, as you touched on earlier, are going to share some of your knowledge with us. So I'm going to stick you in solo mode, so that you've got the floor to yourself. And yeah, I'm just that, Mike. So the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. My solo spot today is going to consist of 4 tips to help you sell your business more smoothly and for more money. It's one of a series of 30 tips, so presumably anybody seeing this video may well have a link to me. Well, you've got a number there, or Paul might put an email. So if you want the other 26, please do email me. But the 4 that I'm going to pick on are: number 1, when you're running a business, make yourself dispensable. Don't build the business around you. Most people do, to be a reality. But if you can make yourself dispensable from the business, put a team in below you so that you don't need to go in every day. Or indeed, I think my number 1 way of measuring whether you're dispensable from your business is if you can go on holiday for 3 months, come back and your business is still running smoothly, maybe even better than it was before you left, then you've got a business that's sellable, because the business itself has its own, is an entity in itself. It's not you. Bear in mind, if you want to sell your business, I can't sell you, I can sell your business. If you have to go with it, then I can't sell it. Again, that's not quite true. I may be able to sell it, but I will need somebody with your skills to come in and replace you. And the multiple of profits that I will achieve by the time I sell your business for that kind of business, as opposed to a business from which you are dispensable, will be considerably lower. So my number 1 tip: make yourself dispensable. Number 2, we've already touched on, which is it's never too soon to start planning your exit. As I indicated to Paul, some people start off with the end in mind. That's a Stephen Covey saying, sorry. So Stephen Covey says start off with the end in mind. Some people do that with business. They literally start off building a business to sell it in 3-4 years time, by the time they've built it up, achieve the numbers they want, and walk away and sell it. Not many people are going to do that, so I don't necessarily expect that to happen, but the sooner you can start, I think Paul mentioned 5 years, that's a good number. Start with that figure. The next tip is that when you put a team together to help you sell your business, that's probably going to include your accountant. That's going to include somebody like me. So it's going to include a business broker or a business transfer agent. It could be somebody, if you're a bigger business, somebody who isn't going to be called themselves a business transfer agent, but it could be an accountant or part of your accountancy practice. Or it could be a business transfer agent. That's obviously going to be important, but I would say that, wouldn't I? So move on to the next person. And I think probably the most important is the solicitor. And I've got one business that I'm trying to sell at the moment. The buyer rang me yesterday and he said, I'm getting so fed up. It's now taken me 12 months to sell this business. He said, my friends are laughing at me. And he genuinely did say that. It should have taken 2 months. And partly the reason it's delayed so much is the seller, but mainly the reason it's delayed so much is the solicitor. Every now and then the solicitor will churn a piece of paper work out, and you think, right, it's all going to go smoothly now, and then it just goes quiet again. And that's what happened 2 weeks ago. They churned out what should have been the last bit of paperwork, and 2 weeks later we've not heard a thing again. So get your solicitor, get somebody preferably who's used to dealing with corporate sales, and somebody, if the first question you ask your solicitor is how much, you're probably just asking the wrong question. You should ask lots of other questions and then ask how much, and make sure you therefore get the right solicitor. And the final question is that if you meet somebody like me, if it's not me, or even if it is me, then check your paperwork, check your agency agreement before you sign it. If you're not totally confident about it, ask for it before you sign it. Send it to your solicitor. Ask your solicitor to look at the pitfalls. I can tell you that there are agency agreements around that have got hidden terms in them. One of them could be a minimum term that longer than my 6 months. It could be 12 months. It could be 2 years. It could be completely open-ended, and then with a cancellation fee at the end. So if you change your mind, or if you come across a member of your family, you change your mind, you want to sell it to a member of the family, or you want to sell it to somebody that you've previously sold on, then that agency agreement will demand a fee from it. And I just don't think that's fair. So look at your paperwork very carefully before you sign it. That's it. Thank you very much, Paul.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll just share your email now so people can email you if they want the other 26 tips. But thank you for that quick snapshot. So final thing, and your ordeal will be over then. If you were to give one top tip for any small business out there, what would that top tip be?
My top tip for anyone running a business is to consider the importance of resilience. All successful business people are really resilient, terribly resilient. That may be that something that's not natural to them, that they've had help with, or it could be that something that is natural to them. And the last 18 months, again, will highlight that the people that are resilient have actually seen the problems of the last 18 months as an opportunity. And other people have just turned their hands up and said, no, I can't do anything, and they walked away from it. So it is important. Don't underestimate that when you're running whatever business you're running.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true, very true. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for your time this morning. I appreciate that time is valuable, so I won't keep you any longer. So thanks again, and we'll end the broadcast there.
Thank you very much, Paul.